And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Saturday, July 26, 2025. And to sort of set things up here through the course of this weekend, starting with Saturday late morning, we have a ridge of high pressure out over the central Aleutians, lower Bering Sea. We have another ridge out here across the interior Alcan border, and then a low pressure circulation down here, especially lower Gulf, well offshore of the Gulf coastline, and also some low pressure energy up here toward the Chukchi Sea areas of eastern Russia. This circulation is keeping IFR conditions mainly offshore now, at least for Sunday morning, of the Panhandle and off the northern Gulf Coast. Back to the west, a push of milder air. There's a weakening frontal system trough that has moisture in the form of some rain that's spreading into along areas of the west coast. And that moisture will continue to travel inland as we get into Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday. So at least the interior here for Saturday, Sunday will enjoy VFR conditions, the threat of some isolated to scattered thunderstorms across especially central areas of the interior for Sunday. And as we see by Sunday afternoon with that daytime heating, could be along and south of the Alaska Range, including parts of the Talkeetna Mountains, the Copper River Basin, as well as in through the Tanana, especially Tanana Valleys, the middle Yukon, on up toward the Brooks Range. And then for Monday morning, we find IFR conditions pretty common along areas of the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, lower Yukon coast, Nunavik Island, down through the Pribilovs and out across the Aleutians. Still looking to VFR to hold on along the Gulf Coast and Panhandle. That area of low pressure is actually going to sink southeastward a little further, and then it might try to come back northward in the midweek period, but that's a little ways out. And so again, across areas of the interior on Monday, VFR to start, and then again, especially the eastern third of the interior, from the central Alaska Range up through the Yukon Flats, eastern third of the Brooks Range down in the Wrangell, St. Elias, Copper River Basin. There could be isolated to scattered thunderstorms pop up Monday afternoon and evening. Still IFR along the areas of the Chukchi Sea coast, especially Utqiagvik down toward the Lisburn Peninsula, areas surrounding Norton Sound, and then extending out especially through the central and western Aleutians. Past conditions on Sunday, we expect Anaktuvik Pass to be VFR. Same thing there, Adigan Pass up there through the Brooks Range. Further south, Lake Clark and Merrill. The further south down along the Alaska Range, VFR conditions. But as we get up toward Rainy Pass, there could be an isolated thunderstorm develop in vicinity on Sunday. Same thing, Windy Pass on through Isabel and Mentasta Passes. All those locations, central eastern Alaska Range. Generally, VFR conditions will prevail, but a few scattered showers and isolated storms could develop in the vicinity of those passes. Tanita Pass could also see a stray shower thunderstorm, especially along the north side of the pass, otherwise VFR. Portage Pass, and yet again across the Panhandle, especially in the north there, Chilkoot and White should enjoy VFR conditions on Sunday. Quick check of the upper level freezing levels. We find dome of a little warmer air associated with that high pressure ridge over the eastern mainland along the Alcan border. We find freezing levels aloft above 10,000 feet along the Alcan border. This little pocket of cooler air south of the Gulf, below 8,000 feet, actually mins out around 6,000 feet. That's associated with this stacked low pressure circulation, not especially strong. And then back to the west, there is some ridging out here across the eastern Bering. There's a surface high pressure ridge that'll be over the central Aleutians. That's going to push eastward into the eastern Aleutians, lower Alaska Peninsula, southeast quadrant of the Bering Sea, and that's why we find these freezing levels higher there over that part of the Bering. So icing potential, a little arm, we have the low circulating here, and there's a little arm of a low pressure trough that may have some showers with it, but freezing levels being high as they are, we're looking outside of Dixon Entrance, west of Haida Gwaii, maybe above 12,000 feet, some moderate icing. The moisture that's coming into the west coast Again, this is a pretty mild system coming in off the Bering. That moisture will eventually cross the interior Sunday night into Monday and Tuesday, and that'll increase the threat, especially around terrain of areas of rain or showers. But before then, Sunday afternoon, we could find isolated moderate icing along parts of the west coast, generally above 12,000 feet, maybe above 10,000 feet around and north of the Lisburn Peninsula up there along the Chukchi Sea coast. So very clearly upper level winds associated at jet stream level, 30,000 feet, roughly 250, 300 millibars. Very clear low pressure circulation south of the Gulf in the North Pacific, a broader flow. Generally west-northwest winds out of eastern Russia crossing the Bering Strait into the Seward Peninsula, 60 to 80 knots at 9,000 feet, 700 millibars. There's that low circulation south of the Gulf. Pretty good wind field up into the lower Gulf. There's a southeasterly flow along this trough in the mid-levels at 50 knots. And then back out here, we have the high pressure ridge, eastern portion of the Aleutians. And you can see that ridging and the going over the top of the ridge, we have west, then northwest winds 35 to 40 knots and bringing it down to 3,000 feet. Here's that low circulation south of the Gulf in the North Pacific, and where we have the trough wrapping around it. Localized winds 30, 35 knots, southeast turning easterly and then northeasterly on the backside. Here we have the opposite circulation with the high pressure ridge over the eastern central Aleutians and over the lower central southeast quadrant of the Bering Sea. Here on the backside of the ridge, 40 to even locally 50 knot winds in the southwest corner of the Bering Sea. Coming over the top of the ridge axis, 40 knot west winds, but those are well to the west-northwest of St. Matthew. And then maybe locally 30 to 35 knots there around Etolan Strait, Nunavik Island. So looking at turbulence potential on Sunday, moderate turbulence possible along areas of the Chukchi Sea coast from the Lisburn Peninsula to Kotzebue Sound, west side of the Seward Peninsula, including St. Lawrence Island. And I would even probably should have extended the potential for maybe a little bit of isolated moderate turbulence from the lower Yukon coast, Demonic, Kotlik down through Nunavik Island. And then way back out here into the western Aleutians, surface to 3,000 feet, we do have, because again, with the high pressure ridge, we find that there might be some stronger winds getting to the surface there in the western Aleutians. And then over here, we still, with the high pressure circulation, northwest winds over the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutians, surface to 4,000 feet, could be some moderate turbulence. And then with that low circulation that's in this area, so like this, it is where we find surface to 6,000 feet along the Panhandle, outer coast there, a moderate turbulence possible Sunday, and then also perhaps the eastern side there of Kodiak Island and toward the western Gulf.